Before you assume this is just another small-town sheriff story, there's something you need to understand first. We didn't stop responding to calls after midnight because crime went down. We didn't do it because we were understaffed, and we definitely didn't do it because we were afraid. We stopped because the calls that come in after midnight aren't asking for help, and the deputies who respond to them either don't come back at all, or they come back carrying something that doesn't leave. Hello everyone, if you enjoy slow-burn creepypasta, realistic law enforcement, horror, and stories where rules matter more than explanations, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let me explain why in Eastern Oregon, we stop responding to calls after midnight. My name is Caleb Warren. I've been the sheriff of a remote county in Eastern Oregon for 11 years. If you've never been out here, it's hard to explain how empty the land feels. Not abandoned, just unfinished. Highways stretch for miles without a single light. Towns are small enough that everyone knows your truck by sound. And at night, the darkness feels deeper than it should. During the day, the job is normal. Noise complaints, property disputes, lost livestock. Nothing that prepares you for what happens after dark. When I first took office, I believed the law worked the same at all hours. Rules were written for a reason, and if you followed them, everything stayed under control. That belief lasted less than a month. On my first overnight shift as sheriff, our dispatcher, her name was Linda, slid a cup of coffee across the desk and said something casually that didn't feel like a joke. "Try not to be on the road after midnight." I smiled. "Linda, that's literally when most calls happen." She didn't smile back. "You'll understand," she said. "This county doesn't need heroes at night." I assumed she meant drunk drivers or wildlife, rural problems. I was wrong. At 11:58 p.m. we got a routine call, noise complaint near the edge of town. Deputy Miles handled it without issue. Everything felt normal. Then 12:01 a.m. hit. Midnight here isn't just a time change. It's a shift you can feel. The radios don't go silent, but it's like the world turns its volume down. Static lingers longer. Voices sound flatter. At 12:14 a.m., another call came in. Linda stared at the screen but didn't answer it. "Pick it up," I said. She looked at me and lowered her voice. "It's one of the midnight calls." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She answered anyway. 911, what's your emergency?" For several seconds, there was only static. Then a voice came through. Calm, controlled, and wrong in a way I couldn't immediately explain. "I need the sheriff," the voice said. "There's someone standing outside." Linda asked for the address. The caller hesitated. "You don't usually come out this late." My stomach tightened. "Sir," I said, taking the radio, "tell me your location." The address he gave existed, technically, but no one had lived there in over 15 years. The road was officially closed, no power, no houses. I told Linda to dispatch Deputy Miles. She shook her head immediately. "No," I stared at her. "I'm the sheriff." "And that's why I'm saying no," she replied. "I took the radio myself." "Unit responding," I said. The caller exhaled softly. "Good," he said. "Leave your lights on." The line went dead. The room went completely still. Linda finally looked at me and said the first real warning of the night. "Sheriff, if you go out there, don't answer anything that calls your name." I asked her what she meant. She looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing something for too long. "They don't always sound like strangers," she said. "Sometimes they sound like dispatch. Sometimes they sound like family. Sometimes they sound like you." I didn't respond to that call. I told myself it was a prank, a system glitch, nothing real. But at 12:47 a.m., another call came in. Different voice, same calm tone. "You don't usually come out after midnight." By 1:30 a.m., 5 calls had come in, each from locations just far enough from town to feel wrong, each ending the same way, and every single one stopped calling the moment the sun came up. The next morning, Linda showed me the files we don't keep in the open, thin folders labeled "Resolved." None of them were missing deputies, abandoned vehicles, reports that ended mid-sentence, and inside every folder, written in different handwriting across decades, was the same line: "After midnight, do not respond." That was the moment I understood. In Eastern Oregon, there are 2 sets of rules: The ones written down, and the ones you follow to survive. And that was only the first rule. The first person to break the rule didn't do it out of bravery. That's important. Deputy Evan Brooks wasn't reckless. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was tired. Brooks had been with the department for 6 years. Solid record. Quiet guy. The kind of deputy who followed procedures without arguing and stayed late without being asked. He knew the rule about midnight calls. Everyone did. But knowing a rule and believing in it are two different things. It happened on a Tuesday night in late November. Cold, clear, no wind. The kind of night where sound should carry for miles. I was finishing paperwork when the radio crackled at 12:22 a.m. Linda stiffened immediately. Another midnight call. She looked at the screen, then at me. No address this time, she said. Just a location ping. The coordinates pointed to a stretch of highway about 10 miles east of town. No houses, no businesses, just open land and an old service road that hadn't been used in years. Brooks leaned back in his chair. That's probably a broken GPS, he said. Could be someone stranded. Linda didn't answer. I shook my head. We don't respond. Brooks frowned. Sheriff, with respect, we've been ignoring these for weeks. If this one's real, it's after midnight, I said. That's the rule. He hesitated, and hesitation is dangerous out here. I'll just drive by, he said. No lights, no contact, just eyes on. Linda looked like she was about to say something, then stopped herself. I should have shut it down harder. That mistake is on me. Brooks grabbed his jacket and keys. As he reached the door, Linda finally spoke. Evan, she said quietly, if anything answers you, don't answer back. He gave a half smile. Copy that. That was the last normal thing he said. We watched his unit move across the map. Steady, controlled, no deviation. At 12:41 a.m., he checked in. Highway's empty, Brooks said. No vehicles, no people. Then he paused. It's really quiet out here. My jaw tightened. Come back, I said immediately. That's an order. There was a delay before he responded. Yeah, he said slowly. I know, it's just weird. Linda leaned forward. Evan, she said, do you hear anything? Another pause. No, he said, that's the thing. His GPS stopped moving. Not lost signal, stopped. Brooks, I said, unit check, static. Then his voice came back, closer to the mic than before. Sheriff, he said calmly, someone standing by the road. My pulse spiked. Describe them. They're not moving, he said, just standing there. Linda whispered, don't ask questions. I ignored her. Evan, keep your distance. I think they're waiting, he said. For what? I asked. For me to stop, he replied. That sentence chilled the room. Evan, Linda said sharply, get back in your vehicle. Now. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice sounded flatter. I already did, he said. The engine's off. Every instinct I had screamed that this was wrong. Started, I said, leave. Now? There was a soft sound over the radio. Not static, not breathing, movement. They're closer now, Brooks said. I didn't hear them walk. Don't look at them, Linda said. I wasn't going to, he replied, but I can see them anyway. What do you mean? I asked. They're not in front of me, he said. They're in the reflection. The radio went silent. For 12 minutes, nothing came through. No signal drop, no emergency tone, just absence. At 12:56 a.m., Brooks's unit moved again, slowly, too slowly. The icon drifted a few yards, then Saint upped. Linda covered her mouth. He's not driving, she said. That speed, he's walking. I grabbed my coat. Linda shook her head violently. You can't go. I'm not losing another deputy, I said. She looked at me, eyes wet. You already did. I stood there, torn between the badge and the rule. Then the radio crackled one last time. Brooks's voice came through, barely above a whisper. It's quieter when I don't move, he said. That was it. No one went out that night. At sunrise, we found his patrol car parked on the shoulder. Engine cold, door closed, lights off. His radio was inside, placed neatly on the seat. We found footprints leading away from the road. They didn't run. They didn't stagger. They just stopped. No disturbance, no struggle, no signs of a fight. The ground ahead of his last step was clean, untouched. Like the land itself refused to acknowledge he'd been there. Brooks was listed as missing, presumed dead. But no one said it out loud, because a week later, something came back. At 6:18 a.m., just after sunrise, Linda called me at home. Her voice was shaking. "He's at the station," she said. "Evan's here. I drove in faster than I ever had." Brooks was sitting in the break room, uniform clean, posture perfect. No injuries, no confusion. He looked up when I entered. "Morning, Sheriff," he said. "Did I miss anything?" Medical exams showed nothing wrong. No dehydration, no exposure, no trauma. When I asked him where he'd been, he thought for a long time before answering. "I stayed," he said. "Where?" I asked. He frowned slightly. "Out there," he said. It felt correct. Linda whispered, "Did you hear anything?" Brooks shook his head. "No," he said, "and that's why it was better." We placed him on leave immediately. Psych evaluations followed. The doctors used words like dissociation and stress response. They couldn't explain why he refused to sit still in quiet rooms, why he slept with a fan on even in winter, why he flinched whenever conversations stopped abruptly. Before he transferred out of state, Brooks said one last thing to me. "They don't want you to disappear," he said. "They just want you to stop." That was the night we added a second rule. Not written, not official, just something we say quietly to new deputies. If the silence starts to feel comfortable, you're already too late. After Evan came back, we stopped pretending the calls were accidents. Up until then, there was still a comforting lie we told ourselves, that the midnight calls were random, that they were glitches, misrouted signals, or some pattern we hadn't figured out yet. That lie didn't survive Evan. Because Evan hadn't just answered a call, the call had been meant for him. That realization changed everything. We went back through the logs, not just recent ones. Every midnight call we had records for, going back as far as the system allowed. We printed transcripts, pulled audio when it existed, compared timestamps, locations, responders. Patterns started showing up almost immediately. The calls didn't target locations, they targeted people. Every deputy who had ever responded after midnight had one thing in common. They were dependable, not reckless, not curious thrill seekers. Dependable people hesitate longer. They second-guess themselves. They pause to make sure they're doing the right thing. And hesitation is exactly what the calls needed. The callers never sounded panicked, never screamed, never begged. They spoke calmly, politely, reasonably. They created just enough doubt to slow someone down. Another thing stood out. The calls never came to the same person twice. If you ignored the first one, you were never contacted again. But if you engaged, even slightly, the calls had Jews. Ted. They learned your cadence, your tone, your phrasing. Linda was the first one to notice it. "They're not calling the station," she said one morning. "They're calling us." That became terrifyingly clear a few nights later. At 12:08 a.m., Linda's personal phone rang. She stared at it like it was a bomb. Unknown number. She didn't answer. The phone stopped ringing. 5 seconds later, the station phone rang. Same number. Linda looked at me. "They know," she whispered. I picked it up. 911, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end sounded familiar. Too familiar. "Linda?" it said. My blood ran cold. "That's not her voice," Linda said instantly. "That's how I sound when I'm tired." The voice continued. "I think I took a wrong turn," it said calmly. "Can you tell me how to get back?" "Back where?" I asked. There was a pause. "Where it's loud," the voice replied. I hung up. The phone stayed silent for the rest of the night. After that, we stopped letting anyone work dispatch alone after midnight. Not for safety, for accountability. Because silence works best when you're isolated. That was when the third rule emerged. The calls only work if you engage, not answer, engage. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to go out. You just have to slow down. That's why they phrase everything as a question, why they ask for clarification, why they hesitate before answering. They're not waiting for help. They're waiting for you to stop moving forward mentally. Once we understood that, we started catching smaller signs. Deputies who lingered too long in quiet hallways. People standing still after a conversation ended, moments where no one spoke and no one felt the need to. Those moments started feeling heavier, like the air itself was waiting. The worst realization came when we noticed something else. The calls weren't increasing. They were spreading out, which meant the silence wasn't getting stronger. It was getting smarter. The first time it followed someone home, we almost missed it. It was Linda. She came in one morning looking exhausted. Didn't say much, didn't complain, just quiet, too quiet. When I asked if she was okay, she nodded. I slept fine, she said, but she hadn't. She later admitted that when she got home the night before, she'd stood in her kitchen for nearly 10 minutes without realizing it. No phone, no noise, no lights, just listening. It wasn't scary, she said. That's what scared me. After that, we started hearing similar things. A deputy who sat in his car after parking, engine off, radio silent. A clerk who stood in a doorway during a shift change, not moving, not blocking anyone, just there. They all described the same sensation, relief. That's when we understood the real danger. The silence didn't feel hostile. It felt reasonable. You could always explain it away. I'm just tired. I needed a moment. I was thinking, that's how it slips past you. We updated the rules again. Unofficially, quietly, never stay still when things go quiet. Never let a room fall silent completely. Never end a conversation without moving away. And most importantly, if silence feels comforting, create noise immediately. Some people laughed when we told them. They stopped laughing after a week, because by then the calls had stopped coming to the station altogether. That's when we realized something worse. They didn't need phones anymore. They had learned how to wait. For a long time we blamed the land. That was the mistake. It felt logical to assume the silence belonged to Eastern Oregon itself. The open space, the empty highways, the distance between towns. It was easier to believe that some places were just naturally quieter than others. But silence like this doesn't come from geography. It comes from behavior. We realized that after the first internal investigation, not a public one, not something you'll ever find in county records, this was something we did quietly among ourselves. We called it a review. What it really was an autopsy of mistakes. We started by isolating one question. What changes right before the silence appears? Not the time of night, not the weather, not even location. The answer was always the same. People slowed down. Every incident, every call, every deputy who came back wrong, every civilian who stood still too long, had one thing in common. They paused, not physically at first, mentally. A moment where nothing demanded their attention. A moment where the world didn't push back. That's when the silence arrived. And that's when we understood something unsettling. The silence isn't an absence. It's a response. The first person who tried to study it wasn't a deputy, it was a consultant, state level. Behavioral sciences, brought in quietly after Evan's return. His name was Dr. Howard Vance, and he specialized in human perception under stress. He didn't believe our explanations. That made him confident. And confidence is dangerous. Vance didn't want reports or warnings, he wanted exposure. Silence isn't a thing, he told us. It's just the lack of stimuli. We warned him, not emotionally, not dramatically. We gave him the rules. Don't go out after midnight. Don't stay still. Don't engage when things go quiet. He nodded politely and ignored all of it. His first experiment was simple. He sat alone in an unused interview room after hours. Lights on, door closed, no phone, no radio, just observation. At 12:36 a.m., he noted that ambient noise dropped slightly. At 12:41, he stopped writing. The camera footage doesn't show anything unusual at first. He sits still, breathing normal, eyes focused. At 12:47, the room's sound profile flatlines, not silence, uniformity. At 12:49, Vance tilts his head slightly, like he's listening. At 12:52, he smiles. That's when Linda shut the feed off, because smiling is the second to last stage. When we checked the room at sunrise, Vance was still there, sitting upright, eyes open, breathing slow and even. He responded when spoken to, but his answers were incomplete. "Did you hear anything?" I asked. "No," he said calmly. "That was the best part." He described the silence as efficient. No distractions, no interruptions, no friction. "The world finally stopped interrupting me," he said. We placed him under medical observation immediately. He lasted 3 days. On the 4th night, a nurse found him standing in the hallway outside his room. Not walking, not wandering, just standing. When she asked if he needed help, he replied, "I was waiting for the quiet to catch up." He never came back to work after that. His report was never filed. But one sentence from his notes stayed with me. "The silence doesn't remove sound, it removes resistance." That sentence changed how we saw everything. The silence wasn't coming from somewhere. It was happening between things, between sounds, between movements, between decisions. That's why it didn't need the forest anymore. The forest was just where it learned the pattern. We tested this carefully after that. Not intentionally, but observation is unavoidable when you know what to look. We noticed it during late-night meetings, long pauses between sentences, people staying seated after discussions ended, no one reaching for a door. Those moments stretched longer than they should have, and every time someone would clear their throat, stand up abruptly, make noise, like instinct fighting back. We stopped Callie. It's silence internally. We started calling it settling, because that's what it did. It settled into gaps. And once it settled, it stayed. The most alarming discovery came when we reviewed non-emergency footage, security cameras, traffic cams, doorway sensors. We saw people pause mid-movement, a man holding his keys but not unlocking his door, a woman standing in a crosswalk after the light changed, a deputy sitting in his patrol car long after turning off the engine. None of them looked afraid. They looked comfortable. That's when we realized something we hadn't wanted to admit. The silence isn't predatory, it's inviting, and it doesn't take you by force. It waits for you to decide that stopping makes sense. The calls were never the danger. They were just the introduction. We didn't notice the pattern at first. That wasn't because the data wasn't there. It was because we were looking in the wrong direction. We kept tracking locations. We kept tracking calls. We kept tracking people. What we should have been tracking was time. The first person to notice it wasn't law enforcement. It was Linda. She brought it up quietly one morning, flipping through old incident summaries with a kind of focus that only comes from exhaustion. "Why are so many of these in October?" she asked. I leaned over her shoulder. Missing persons, midnight calls, unresolved incidents, year after year, October. Not every case, but enough that it stopped being coincidence. At first, we blamed the obvious reasons: shorter days, longer nights, colder weather. But none of that explained why the silence behaved differently. October wasn't darker. It was slower. People hesitate more in October. They linger. They pause. The season itself encourages stopping. The air cools. Movement feels optional. Stillness feels earned. That's when the silence thrives. We went back. Further. Decades this time. Handwritten logs. Retired deputies' notebooks. Old county memos that never made it into digital systems. The language was different, but the message was always the same. October feels heavier. The quiet doesn't leave right away. People stand longer than they should. One entry from 1974 stood out. "It isn't the night that causes it. It's the time of year when people stop pushing forward." That line explained everything. The silence doesn't arrive suddenly. It settles. October gives it permission. That's why the calls increase but don't overwhelm. That's why disappearances don't spike dramatically. That's why the worst incidents aren't violent. People don't vanish. They remain. The first civilian incident we officially connected to October happened 3 years ago. A man named Robert Keene, mid-40s, local, no mental health history, routine evening walk. His route never touched the forest, never left his neighborhood. He was found standing at the edge of his driveway, upright, eyes open, breathing, 3 steps from his front door. His porch light was on, his keys were in his hand. When I spoke to him, his answers were slow but clear. "I just needed a minute," he said. A minute for what? I asked. He thought about it. For it to finish settling, he replied. That sentence ended any remaining doubt. October wasn't amplifying the silence. It was teaching it patience. That was when we implemented the final seasonal protocols. Again, unofficial. No one outside the department knows these exist. No solo patrols after sunset in October. No night shifts without overlapping conversations. No quiet rooms left unattended. No lingering after tasks are finished. And the most important one, no standing still near a boundary. Boundaries matter more than locations. Doorways, driveways, trailheads, county lines, places where movement normally stops. That's where the silence gathers. We saw it during traffic stops. Drivers sitting too long after being cleared, deputies pausing before walking away. We started forcing motion. Drive safe, we'd say loudly. Have a good night, keep moving. Noise became a tool, not to scare the silence, to deny it opportunity, but October wasn't finished with us. It never is. The most disturbing event happened on October 27th. No calls, no disappearances, no emergency, just a feeling. Linda called me at 9:14 p.m. There's something wrong with the neighborhood near Pine Ridge, she said. What kind of wrong? I asked. It's too calm, she replied. A woman had called in, not a 911 call. The non-emergency line. She didn't report a crime. She said her dog wouldn't stop staring at the trees, and that the shadows didn't line up with the streetlights. When I arrived, I felt it immediately. That same pressure in my chest, that same absence of response. No insects, no wind, no distant traffic noise. The houses were fine. The people were fine. The space between them wasn't. The woman stood on her porch, arms wrapped around herself. It feels like night shouldn't be here yet, she said. I asked if anyone was missing. She shook her head. No, she said. But it feels like something is waiting for someone to stop moving. That was the moment. I understood the final truth. The silence hadn't crossed the boundary. The boundary had moved. October didn't bring the silence. October taught it how to leave the forest. For years, we told ourselves one thing. The silence stayed outside. It belonged to forests, highways, empty roads, places where people already expected quiet. As long as it stayed there, we believed we could manage it. That belief died quietly, not with a disappearance, not with a call, but with a living room. He first confirmed incident happened 3 days after the Pine Ridge neighborhood report. No panic, no emergency response, just a wellness check that felt wrong from the moment we arrived. The house belonged to an elderly couple, Tom and Marlene Haskins, married 42 years, no criminal history, no medical alerts. Their daughter lived 2 towns over and called us because her parents hadn't answered their phone all day. The house looked normal from the outside. Lights on, curtains open, no signs of forced entry. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt it. That same pressure in the chest, that same lack of response. The house wasn't silent. It was finished. We found Tom and Marlene sitting on opposite ends of the couch, upright, relaxed, hands folded, eyes open. They were breathing. When I spoke their names, they turned their heads slowly as if reacting to something distant. "Sheriff?" Tom said. "Is it morning already?" "It is," I replied. "You okay?" Marlene smiled gently. "We were just resting," she said. I asked how long they'd been sitting there. They exchanged a look. "I'm not sure," Tom said. "We didn't feel the need to get up. The television was off. The clock on the wall had stopped, not broken, stopped." Later, when their daughter arrived, and the house filled with voices, movement, noise, something shifted. Tom blinked hard. Marlene gasped like she'd been holding her breath. They were confused, embarrassed, shaken. They couldn't explain what happened. But before they left with their daughter, Marlene turned to me and said something I haven't been able to forget. "It followed us inside," she whispered. "We didn't invite it. We just stopped." That night we stopped, thinking of the silence as environmental. We started thinking of it as behavioral. Homes didn't protect people. Movement did. Over the next week, similar reports trickle. Not emergencies, not crimes, moments, people standing in kitchens longer than necessary, sitting in parked cars with engines off, pausing mid-task and not remembering why they stopped. None of them felt fear. That was the most disturbing part. Fear would have pushed them to move. Instead, they felt calm, satisfied. We began warning people quietly, not publicly, not officially. We told them to leave radios on, keep televisions playing, avoid sitting in silence for long periods. Most people laughed. A few didn't. The ones who didn't had felt it already. The data confirmed something worse. Disappearances went down. At first that looked like progress. Then we understood what it meant. The silence didn't need people to vanish anymore. It just needed them to pause indefinitely. Standing still doesn't raise alarms. Sitting quietly doesn't trigger reports. People weren't missing. They were present. That's how it avoided attention. That's how it learned to survive outside the forest. The final internal memo we ever wrote about the silence was short. No explanations, no theories, just instructions. Never let a room go quiet all at once. Never stay still after completing a task. Never linger in thresholds, and never confuse calm with safety. We stopped calling it the silence after that. We called it the settling, because it didn't arrive violently. It settled where motion ended. I noticed it in myself one evening, months after October. I was standing in my kitchen after turning off the lights. No radio, no TV, no noise. Just darkness and stillness. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening. Not for a sound, for the absence of one. That was when I understood the final warning. The silence doesn't want the forest. It doesn't want the town. It doesn't even want the night. It wants permission. And humans give it permission. Very time they decide that stopping makes sense. I turned on the light. I spoke out loud. I moved, and the pressure lifted. Barely. I left Eastern Oregon 2 years after the silence crossed into homes. Not because things got worse, because they got quiet again. That's how you know it's dangerous. After October ended, the reports slowed. No more midnight calls. No more people standing still long enough to worry anyone. Sound returned, life resumed. And that scared me more than everything that came before. Because normal makes people forget. Normal convinces them it was stress, weather, imagination. Normal erases rules. The department never issued a public statement. There was nothing to explain. No crimes, no evidence, no bodies. But internally, we changed everything. The final rule wasn't written in a manual. It wasn't posted on a wall. It was spoken once during a closed meeting and never repeated. Never reward the quiet. Not with curiosity, not with patience, not with stillness. Because the silence doesn't take you. It waits for you to choose not to leave. Before I retired, a new deputy asked me something I couldn't answer directly. "What is it?" he said. "The silence. What does it want?" I told him the truth. "It doesn't want anything," I said. "It just removes friction." Fear is friction. Noise is friction. Movement is friction. When those disappear, nothing pushes back. That's how people stop. I moved to a city after retiring, somewhere loud, somewhere unfinished, traffic outside my window, voices through thin walls, sirens at night. Cities don't let silence settle. Sometimes, late at night, everything lines up wrong. The traffic stops. The neighbors go quiet. The air feels heavy. In those moments, I feel it again, that soft suggestion. You don't need to move. I never listen. I turn on a light. I make noise. I speak my name loud. Because I learned the final truth too late for some people. The silence doesn't belong to forests. It doesn't belong to towns. It doesn't even belong to night. It belongs to hesitation. And hesitation exists everywhere. If you ever find yourself somewhere, anywhere, and the quiet feels deliberate, don't admire it, don't study it, don't stand still long enough to understand it. Move, because the silence is patient, and it doesn't need forests anymore.